Welcome to the Optimum Synergy Podcast, where we discuss all aspects of auto detailing with successful Optimum detailers from around the world. From San Diego, California, here's your host, Dan Williams, Optimum's Western Regional Manager. Take it away, Dan.
Welcome to the Optimum Synergy Podcast. I have today a returning guest from Cambria, England. Is it called England or UK?
That's a complicated question. I'm in England, which is part of the United Kingdom.
There we go. You know, and I probably said this before, but I did my 23andMe, my DNA thing, and that's where my ancestors are from, right from in London. It's pretty neat.
Excellent. Excellent. That's what we like to hear.
Anyway, I digress. Stephen Jackson, who is a lean process specialist. We had him on before, maybe a year or so ago, and we talked about lean processing. Always fitting to any small business and detail business, being more efficient. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Dan. It's nice to be back talking to you and the Optimum Synergy podcast.
Yeah, and I say today, and it's like 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning for you, and it's 10:30 in the morning for me.
No, it's just before 6 o'clock. Well, nearly 6 o'clock.
Oh, okay. I don't know what the heck I was thinking. You're not on the.
No, I think it's when we were arranging this. It was nearly your home time, and it was something like 1 o'clock in the morning for me.
Oh, okay. Now that makes sense. And I should know this because I went there a couple of years ago, and it's like a 8-hour or so time difference.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard, Dan. Welcome aboard. All right. So, Stephen, tell me a little bit. Let's catch everybody back up to speed on what you do with this lean processing and a little overview of what it is, and then we're going to crack into some concepts that you have.
Well, lean is a name that was given many years ago to people who were looking at the Toyota production system, which essentially was showing that there are many efficiencies to be gained from very simple techniques. It doesn't require fancy equipment or anything like that. It's all about, the basis is, what does our customer want? What does our customer value? We will build everything around that. So if our customer doesn't want to pay for it, our customer doesn't see value in it, we will not do it.
So if this is from Toyota, is this a Japanese concept when it was in Japan? Because they have and maybe is that because they live on like a smaller, island, so everything has to be more efficient?
Well, when it started out, so we go to the end of the Second World War. Japan is decimated from the fighting. Resources are always an issue in Japan, but following the war, resources were a huge issue. Toyota wanted to start building cars. They sent people over to America, to Ford, to look to the way they were doing things. And they realized, actually, we can't do that. We don't have the capacity and the resources to match what Ford are doing. Therefore, we need to start finding an easier way of doing things with smaller amount of resources. And so, actually, people tend to think of it as Japanese. There were a number of engineers that were sent over from America to help Japan rebuild. Famously, there was a guy called Edwards Deming, who was a major figure in the efficiency and engineering world. And then after he helped Toyota become this gigantic organization, he returned to America and was helping people like Ford and General Motors and Boeing do amazing things. So lean is all about doing less to get the same result with fewer resources. So I suppose if you think about it, if you've got but in detailing terms, if you've got if you're washing a car and your bucket is 20 feet away from the car, then you may get used to having to walk in 20 feet or 40 feet around journey. Lean, in a very simple way, would say, bring the bucket to the car.
Or put one on both sides of the car.
Terms. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't the back to Japanese, but didn't they, like, to be so much more efficient, even, and I'm just going off the cuff here of something that I kind of remember. Do they make watermelons that are square so they like fit in the refrigerator or something like that?
Oh, I don't know. I love the sound of that. I don't know, but it's that's just a crazy idea, and I love the sound of that. I honestly, I don't know.
This could be something crazy that I just dreamed one day. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure like they even like to save more space, they were like growing somehow square watermelons.
I mean, they are very big on using space. I mean, Japanese homes are rather like British homes. They tend to be very small, say, compared to American or Canadian homes. So you've got to work harder. You can't just clutter things up because you simply don't have the space to do things. And I think Japanese homes are generally slightly smaller than British homes. So, if you're working, if you reduce the size of your home by, say, 2/3, then you need to work a lot harder to keep things from falling into chaos.
That's because it's so old, over in the other parts of the world. Nobody has yards in England, which was I found bizarre.
Yeah,
my little plot of land is 6,000 square feet, and I just can't imagine not being able to have a garden and a yard and stuff.
Well, I suppose it depends how rich you are. If you're very wealthy, then you can afford a huge amount of space. But land in places like London is, I suppose it would be the equivalent of New York. Its land is very, very expensive. And so if you're a developer, you want to build as many properties on every square inch of property rather than give it over to greenery and nice things.
That's like here in Southern California, everything now, they're just building up because all the land is kind of gobbled up, and people who have older houses and, a house with a yard, it's kind of becoming a thing of the past with all the new construction is multi-level.
Yeah. I suppose this is just a future. And maybe, for those with money, they can afford very large gardens or very large properties. Fair enough. But
well, that's a lean, efficient use of space. If you build it up to circle right back to what we're talking about. I'm sorry. I get you've listened to the podcast. I go
Indeed.
Off track. I'm trying.
Back
on track, Stephen. This is about you, not me talking about real estate.
I think there's probably many people who would say I'm not quite as focused as you, Dan. I tend to go off on tangents very, very easily.
Oh, good. Then we're just going to have a fun hour. Indeed. All right.
So anyway, the reason I contacted you, I saw a really nice video with Ivan LaCroix from doing a video with the Rag Company about a month or two ago. And the basis of this video was to say, this was really talking about when detailers present videos on YouTube or wherever it is, they always show them cleaning the outside of a vehicle.
We call it detailer porn.
Yes, indeed. And to other detailers, it looks fantastic. But what Ivan was talking about was to many customers, many non-detailers, what they find what is valuable to them is interior detailing. And yet there are very few, comparatively speaking, interior details being filmed. I don't know whether it's hard to film such a thing.
It's just not the sexy side of detailing, cleaning up coffee stains.
But so going back to Toyota, what does the customer value? The customer values interior details. So the reason this kind of resonated with me is I give this story when I'm doing training sometimes, and it may sound a little obscure, but this is going back to 1941. So for the British who've been fighting the Germans for about 2 years, and we are heavily dependent on convoys from America and Canada. And the Germans are sinking a scary amount of these boats. And things are quite desperate as far as getting food and ammunition and all this kind of stuff from abroad. So in late 1941, the military set up this tiny little unit called the Western Approaches Tactical Unit, because the military don't like to use short words. And the idea of this group of less than a dozen people was to war game what was going on, why so many ships were being sunk by the Germans. Now, at this point during the war, convoys had military escorts. They just weren't very good at sinking the attackers, the Germans. So this small group was set up, and it was set up by a retired captain who had served during the First World War. He re-enlisted in 1939 at the start of the Second World War for us. But importantly, he had tuberculosis, which meant he couldn't return to combat. But he was a highly experienced captain, and he was tasked with setting up a small group to look at why we are losing so many ships, why we are not effective. So he set up a small group, and key to this story is that he acquired 4 young women between the age of 17 and 21, I think they were, had no combat experience whatsoever. The only thing that made these women stand out is that they were deemed to be very bright and good at maths, or maths, as you would say over there. So the problem was U-boats would come along to a convoy and sink the convoy, or sink ships in the convoy. When this happened, a naval warboat would whiz off to one side and start bombing water, and had a very, very low success rate. This Western Approaches Tactical Unit was set up in the northwest of England, worked out of a top floor in a place called Liverpool, so it's where the Beatles came from, and their job was to ponder why the Navy was so poor at sinking U-boats. And there's 2 key things here. One, they had access to all the reports that came in from the convoy. So anytime anything unusual happened, it was reported, and they had access to that report. The second thing is they had time to ponder what was going on and to try different scenarios to try and work out why something works, why something else doesn't work. And it turned out these 4 young women became exceptional at working out what was happening. So, for example, if you and you see this in many of the war films, if you're a submarine commander and you want to sink a large number of ships, you go off to one side so you can see the broadside of every ship, and you can just take aim and fire your torpedoes and you'll hit something. And this is the assumption that the Navy were taking, so that when a ship was sunk, they would whiz off to one side and start searching for a U-boat. But very rarely did they find something. These young women calculated that actually this was not happening at all. The U-boats were not going off to one side. What they were actually doing was during nighttime, they would appear in the convoy, in between the ships, on the surface, and would fire their torpedoes at whatever ship they were aiming at. They would then sink or submerge and then fall behind the convoy, reload, and get ready to take action again. And it was these young women who realized this is what was actually happening. They were not firing off to the side. And so the British changed their tactics. So in the event of a ship being sunk, a warcraft would just pull back far behind the convoy and then start searching the area in front of it, and then very quickly started to have a lot of success in sinking U-boats, because the U-boats didn't realize we'd changed tactics, and were basically just then much more successful at sinking the German warcraft. And the reason why this kind of made me think about this when Ivan was talking about it was that what the British commanders were doing in the Navy was they were attacking in the way that they thought, if I was an attacker, this is what I would do. Mm-hmm. And were locked into that mindset. If I've got a warboat, if I've got a battleship, I would go off to one side and I would just start shooting at the ships as they go in front of me, and got locked into that mindset. Secondly, they had the space and the time to ponder all the different things, all the different problems that they had to face. They weren't under attack. They were based in Liverpool. They were not being attacked. They had the space and the time to do this. So for the U-boats, consider your customers. If you deliver services which you think this is what my customers want, it may or may not be true. But if you are not delivering what they want, then you are giving away money to someone else who will give them what they want.
Yeah.
Just because it's always been done that way. So, it's easy as a detailer. You can be incredibly skilled with a rotary or whatever it is, and you can achieve astonishing levels of clarity on paintwork. But if you're a busy mother and you just want the coffee stains pulled out of the carpet, that's what's of value. Glossy paint.
Yeah, I think detailers are kind of split into different categories. You have some guys who they will not do any interiors, like their business model is built like that. This kind of goes back to like it's their sandbox; they can play with it however they want.
Indeed.
When I was a detailer full time, I did whatever. If you were going to give me money, I would do it. I wasn't too. In fact, I actually enjoyed doing a minivan that was just beat down with children, where I had to remove stains and gum and candy, and you could really see a difference from your before and after.
Yes.
I wasn't, and of course you make the most money doing coating jobs, really, but I wasn't stuck on only doing that. I kind of had a more holistic approach to it.
I think if someone says this is our model, if you come to me, it means that we are going to do something amazing to the paint or whatever your speciality is. That's fine. But are you still making money from it? Are you turning away money? Some people may say we are not interested in routine cars. We only do exotic, Ferraris or Lamborghinis or whatever, and that's fine. What I'm saying is, if you're trying to make money out of something, the focus should be on what your customer wants. Now, it could be that someone turning up saying, I want a coating, or, here's my fancy sports car, turn it into something that I can take to Pebble Beach. That's fine, because you are delivering what the customer wants. And that's really, I suppose, the basis of all business, no matter the industry. You see, there's lots of people who've come up with very clever ideas for which there wasn't a market and didn't make any money.
One of the problems also, as we started with the videos that the detailers do, is they don't put a specific. I think in marketing, you put a problem, and then you offer a solution, and then you offer how you can give them that solution. And a lot of them kind of skip over the problem, where they don't show the problem. They just show the car being worked on by people. It would be akin to, say you wanted to have your engine modified. And so you would make a commercial of the car being worked on by the mechanics doing the work, but you wouldn't like show the results on the street, like on the drag strip or something, or wherever the results came from, to show what you actually got, which I guess they show a shiny car at the end of it. But they don't say what it's protected from and the reason. You know, I think that's where a lot of it gets missed.
Yes, and I suppose you are solving a problem. Otherwise, why would someone come to you? Someone's got a dirty car, or they want it coated, or whatever their problem. They are turning up because they perceive you can give them something that they can't or don't want to do for themselves. So, if someone's spilt coffee, or someone's been sick, or there's a child's been sick in the back seat, maybe they can't do it, maybe they don't want to do it, but they've got a problem, so they take it to someone who can fix it. In the same way, if I break my arm, I go and see a doctor who can fix my problem. I don't turn up to the doctor to say, my arm is perfect, do you want to have a look at it?
So, like when I would sell a coating, I would use, for example, and this was something that everybody's seen, is when a bird poops on a car and it'll etch into the paint, and you cannot correct it after that. It goes down into the clear coat. And so I would say, if you have Opti-Coat on your car, it will never break through that Opti-Coat, and you'll never have that etching. That permanent mark will not be in your paint. So I gave the people a problem and a solution, and that was my main selling point. Or maybe you could say it's easier to clean because dirt's going to release easier, and it's not going to mar your paint as much, over time.
Were you selling to detailers, or were you selling to the kind of the general public?
General public myself. Right, this is when I was detailing and I was actually selling my service.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking here of my father. My father has no interest in cars. A car is a simple utility object. He has the same emotional involvement with cars as he has with shoes or shoelaces or socks. It's just an object he needs, and he has no emotional involvement at all whatsoever. So if he has never seen a swirl, he has no interest in swirls. But if you said to him, we can do something to make your interior look nice and clean and protect it, or we can protect the paintwork from bird droppings, that might interest him. But he is never going to pay someone to do a 2 or 3 step polishing and do amazing things with the wheels. He doesn't care. He has no interest whatsoever. So anyone talking to him about, we've got this fancy polish, or we've got this fancy wax, has no interest. You're almost talking a different language. Mm-hmm. But as you say, put something on the paintwork that stops damage to the paintwork. He probably would like the sound of that.
Mm-hmm. And then for him, you turn it to what his problem could be is when he goes to sell that car in the future, having it be worth more money.
Absolutely. Yes. So it all comes down to what your customer wants, what they find valuable. And if your customers do want incredibly glossy paintwork and you can deliver that, that's great, that's fantastic. But if you're selling a product to soccer moms who really do not care at all about glossy paintwork but want the interior to be cleaned up easily, then selling an interior coating has a lot of value to them.
Yep. It's really over the past, since Dr. Gudusi released Opti-Coat, which was the first ceramic coating, it completely changed how detailing is. And it's funny to me that some of the people who maybe they sell somebody else's coating, or maybe the older people like me who have been in the game for a while, less so than the new people who are, younger people who are just coming into their early 20s, and they don't know all the history really. Yeah. So they could think any of one of these other companies is just as was influential in creating it, but it changed detailing completely with the amount of money you can make, and it turned it into an actual viable career on a much wider scale. When people, you would do a full detail before and you would get $200, and now you can do a coating and make, $1,000 plus in profits just, off of that job.
So it would be crazy not to do it.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's some of the companies that I see, because I see how everybody works, and some of the ones who have really done well and marketed themselves correctly, and that's all that they do, they just make money hand over fist. And it's really neat to see people who say they have a college degree and maybe they're an engineer, or they have some legit job where they went to school for, and they leave that to go into detailing. And in the old days, before coatings came out, I don't think that people would have done that. They wouldn't have left, a career to go just wax people's cars.
But if you can make money and you can pay the bills and you can make a healthy profit, then it shows that it's a viable alternative to many traditional businesses. In the same way, there are a lot of these youngsters now who are doing makeup tips on Instagram and YouTube, who this is their full-time job. And I think it's remarkable that there are people who just sit in their own homes with a camera and, talk about whatever it is that they want to talk about, and can do that enough to be able to pay the bills. And I think it's remarkable, so stop being an engineer to go off and sell coatings shows how dynamic the detailing industry is, and how different it is to 20 or 30 years ago, or, even 10 years ago.
It kind of is a fulcrum point,
Indeed.
For things that are jobs that are going away with the social media and all of that. There's all these new jobs that have popped up so it kind of, in some sense, evens out.
And there is a lot of anxiety with a lot of jobs disappearing, with automation and all this kind of technology coming in. But I was recently listening to a podcast on the very first spreadsheet, or commercially available spreadsheet, called VisiCalc, which I think came out 40 years ago, I think last week or the week before. And VisiCalc changed finance forever. Before VisiCalc, you required large amounts of people with pens, paper, rubber, and they would add things up, and they were always crossing out the numbers and getting rid of the numbers and putting in new numbers. And it was incredibly time consuming. And I was listening to a podcast on the BBC, and they were talking about this, and they were saying that VisiCalc cost these lower skill jobs. There was around about 400,000 jobs went within a few years in America alone.
Wow.
But it created 600,000 higher paid, higher skilled financial jobs, because the market went from we need people to add up very large sums of data manually to we can just do that. The really interesting thing is, what is this data telling us? What can we predict from this? So the market changed dramatically. But it changed positively. I'm not saying every market will change positively, but we live in an age of uncertainty when it comes to careers. But unlike 30 years ago, I'm probably no good on giving makeup tips, but theoretically,
I don't know. Your eyes look stunning, Stephen.
Well, that's very kind. It's a new shade. But that's what's remarkable about these days, is that we can, there is these opportunities. I'm talking to you, Dan. You're in San Diego. I'm in the United Kingdom. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have communicated. I wouldn't have heard of Optimum Polymer Technologies. I wouldn't have known of Optimum No Rinse and all this kind of stuff. When I started in around about 2000, there was a tiny number of UK companies who sold bulk products for quick cleaning, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
I'm sorry, but when you started, what, in 2000?
When I started detailing,
okay,
on a kind of just my own entertainment, really. The range of products today compared to in 2000 is just a world away. When my first buffer was a porter cable, I had to order that from America. I think the shipping was virtually the same price as the purchase price. Then I had to buy a large transformer because America works on 110 volts, we work on 240. So I had to spend a huge amount more money on buying this large industrial transformer, had to get specialist cable. And I have no idea what would have happened if the buffer had turned up and it had been damaged. It just wouldn't have been worth returning.
Oh, my goodness.
And, if I wanted to try different polishes, I had to import them from America. And that was very expensive, and it took a very long time.
And it was 2000. So there was internet back then.
Well, there was internet, but it's very basic.
New.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yes. So I wouldn't have heard of Optimum. There were these, what to my ears were esoteric brands like Maguire's. And I could see what people were talking about on the American forums, but they were just, magical products as far as I could tell.
And back then, the forums were like those BBS things, right?
Absolutely. Yes, in the good old days, yes. And of course there was no videos, there was nothing like that. So when someone was trying to explain, I'm having this problem buffing out this kind of thing, no one could refer you to a video because it would have taken a day to download a 30-second video.
Right. So any young people listening to this, you have no idea the struggle that we've seen.
Oh, God, you youngsters, you don't know how good you've got it. Actually, the only nice thing about being young and being told about how easy they've got it today is in 30 years, they will be saying exactly the same.
Right.
In my day, in 2020... Right. You have no idea.
And you know what? We win because there was no Facebook and there was no cameras on a telephone when we were in our teens and 20s to have incriminating evidence. Thank goodness. These kids today, boy, you got to watch yourself.
No, it's a different world, and I suppose it's scary, and there's some bad stuff out there, but there's also, it's amazing that I can pick up my phone and I can FaceTime with someone else, and in a different part of the world or a different part of the country, and someone phones you up and say, well, we're having this kind of problem, and I can talk them through it on Skype or Zoom or whatever it is. And it's just remarkable. Previously, I would need to have got a car, driven, X number of hours to get there to say, oh, it's this. Man, and then return home again.
I imagine it was probably like this for where you were too. But when I was a kid, like say if we were going to call my grandparents, or my parents got divorced when I was really young, so I'd want to call my sister or my mom, and you would have to do that on Sundays, like when the rates were lower on the telephone.
Indeed. Yes.
And it was all planned out. Okay, you've been on there for 20 minutes. You got to get off the phone.
Yes. And I suppose it's easy to be nostalgic, but there was a lot of it wasn't all good times in the past. But no, it's so great that these youngsters coming up now have so many more opportunities than I could have ever dreamt of when I was 20 years old. When I was 20, it was all about, standard careers, going to work for one company, and you'd expect to be there, 10, 20 years or retire when you were there. And now that's essentially gone for most industries.
What's the average tenure for somebody to stay at a job?
These days, it's about 3 or 4 years.
And why do you think that is because of social, or not social media so much, but maybe the internet, where there's so much more in front of you? Like before, you would have to, I guess, look in the newspaper. I'm not even sure. How did people find jobs before the internet? I remember you used to have to go in and fill out an application somewhere and then, turn it in. Now, even for, lower end jobs at a store, maybe, stocking shelves or something. You still do all of that online now.
Yes, I'm trying to think how I got my first few jobs, and actually I don't remember.
My 20s, I worked in restaurants, so I would just walk in and fill out an application and get an interview.
Yeah, I think for a lot of jobs it was probably like that. I suppose.
How would you even find the job? Like how?
I do remember going to the local library. I don't know if libraries still exist, but I do remember going to the local library and looking up the names and addresses of organisations so I could write to them to say, "Here I am, give me a job,"
and then put it into the regular mail with a stamp.
And then, well, yes, either handwrite it, or I was lucky enough I had a typewriter at home, a manual typewriter. And then just put it in the post, and then wait, several weeks for someone to respond or not respond. So yeah, it's a different world.
That's the kind of fun thing of doing a podcast with you. Pretty much what you do is lean, and you can look at anything pretty much in history, and it's
absolutely.
It's just progression.
For example, I was watching a video this morning from actually posted by Toyota. Toyota in Brazil Toyota have set up a division where they go out and they help non-profit governmental departments. So, for example, they were helping a hospital in Brazil, and one of the beautiful things they looked at was waiting rooms, where they mapped out the route that people took, and I suppose waiting rooms are the same the world over. That someone would sit down, they would be called into a room, they would go into this room, see the doctor or whoever it was, they would go and sit back down. And then they would do this kind of backwards and forwards journey multiple times as they saw different people. And what Toyota did was they created a very simple process. So you sit down, then you go into one room, and then you don't go back to your chair. You go into the next cubicle to see the doctor or the nurse or the specialist, whoever it is, and then you leave. So you're not going backwards and forwards. You're not covering the same ground over and over.
Is this the Western approach that you were?
I think it's a Western. Yeah. Well, really, what it comes down to is when people talk about efficiency, there's two ways of looking at efficiency. One is internal efficiency, so doing more with less. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a legitimate business approach. The other approach is to look at it from efficiency from the customer's perspective. So how long am I waiting? So, for example, if you were to go to a supermarket on a Saturday afternoon and there was only one till open, then a manager of the supermarket could look at that person on the till and say, look how hard they are working. They are working at maximum efficiency. They are just completely snowed under. But from a customer's perspective, you have very, very long queues.
Right.
So if you take it from a customer's perspective of flow, i.e. moving without pausing, then you would open up many, many tills. Or these days, you've got these kind of shops where you can just walk out without paying, or legitimately without paying. And so it's removing the barriers.
And this would be the difference in an outside of government job and a government job. So say you go to the DMV, that's where you go to get your driver's license and all that stuff here, and they don't care because you have to be there and there's no other place that you can go to. But if you're going to a store to buy something, you'd want to have it more efficient so you could sell more stuff.
Yes, but if a DMV said, well, hold on, if we start to take into account our customers and we have more staff,
job, they don't care. They don't care.
But if they were, then actually their workload would reduce. If they're looking at all the processes that don't add value, but don't do very much, then they would work less hard. The customers would get through quicker, So the customers would be happy. They would get what they want. And you've got people working. I'll give you my favorite example of flow. So that is a product or a service or whatever it is moving without delay or hesitation. And I wish I could remember the exact figures. The world record for running the 400, or a male running the 400 meters, is just over 42 seconds. The world record for the 4x100 meter relay, so 4 people running 100 meters at a time, is 6 seconds quicker. Now, if you're looking at it from an internal efficiency perspective, you would say, well, one person can run it in 42 seconds. That's what we want. But if you say, well, we want the quickest way of getting from A to B, then having 4 people run 100 meters at a time is far quicker. But in traditional management, if you look at the race as a whole with the relay, most of the time you've got 3 men who are not doing very much. In fact, they're doing nothing other than standing around waiting for something to happen. At maximum, you've got 2 people doing something. So as the baton has been handed over from one person to another, you have a tiny peak of 50% efficiency. But most of the time in the relay, you are running at 25% efficiency. But it is 6 seconds quicker. So the question for the business is, what's important to you? So low-cost airlines are famous for going down, we don't care about customers' expectations. We are doing things which are efficient for us and are cheap for us. If you're serving customers in a retail store or something like that, then you want those customers to go through quickly. You don't want them hanging around.
So this might be the difference between an automated car wash and a detail service.
Yeah, indeed, yeah, and it's what has value to the customer. I'll give you. There's an extreme example of from Sweden. There's a guy called Nicholas Modig who writes about this. So this is going back a few years ago, and this is a service for women where they find a lump in their breast and it concerns them. So they would go to the doctor, and the doctor would then refer them on to a specialist. And on average, it took 42 days from the referral to a diagnosis. Now, I suppose, in that 42 days, if you're worried, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's an eternity.
Indeed. So what the Swedish authorities did was they brought all the specialists, all the equipment, everything into one place. So now a woman could walk in without a referral. They could see somebody, and on average, within 4 hours, walk out with a diagnosis.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
And but what this means is there are doctors and nurses and clinicians who are not busy all the time because you are waiting for customers. You're not, you can't schedule people being worried about breast cancer. So you have people who are not busy, but the outcome is the speed in which they are moving through the system is vastly superior. 4 hours versus 42 days is a completely different game. And there are medical issues that if you find a lump small enough, your treatment is not as severe and as expensive as if it was when the lump has grown significantly higher. So you're taking less time off work. Your overall treatment is far less expensive. So there are many advantages. So it all comes down to what are the values of the organization? What do they want? If speed is an issue of getting someone through the process quickly, and that could be the same with detailing. There's lots of people I see on YouTube who say, or on the forums who say, I've spent 50 hours polishing this car. And that's great from a technical perspective. That's really, really good. But if you're only billing $100, that's not impressive at all. But if you could do a polish in, I'm making numbers up now, but if you could do a polish in 2 hours and bill $100, well, maybe that sounds a little bit better, or do it in an hour.
Or alternatively, if you charged, $10,000 for your 50 hours, so absolutely. It mathematically worked out the same. Or you could efficiently be doing other jobs quicker and have more gross at the end.
Yes, absolutely. So it's all about what the customer wants and what do they value. So if I phone up my bank because I've got a query, I don't want to spend an hour on the telephone on hold. I want to talk to someone.
I hate those automated things where you got to punch the button. I loathe that.
I have found that with my bank, it always seems to be about 20 minutes. So I think they've calculated
until you get to a human.
To get to a human. So I think they've done the calculation of what's the number of staff they need in a call center versus queue time.
Do you think that they have like an attrition rate? Like they know, they're like, okay, if we wait for 10 minutes, we're going to lose this many. And their goal is to lose everybody and have them just go to the bank.
But that's the beauty of the modern world, is you can do the analytics on almost anything. So, I suppose after 20 minutes, you're only getting the most persistent people. But yeah, so if, my bank could have more staff on, which increases their costs, which is fair enough, but I would then maybe spend 5 or 10 minutes on the telephone. So the throughput would be greater. So it all comes down to, what does the organization want?
And you have a much longer wait when it gets to the thing where it's like, hey, do you want to get a new mortgage or do you want to get a loan? You probably get through to somebody a lot quicker because they're going to make money on that. And
absolutely.
If you're just in there to report some kind of a problem or gripe, they're going to be like, well, that's a 20-minute queue.
Absolutely. And I mean, and this is not just conjecture. There's a lot of mathematics behind this. There's a guy called Little, it has, strangely enough, it's called Little's Law. And there are equations for working out queue time of how long people have to wait. And this is used in call centers. It's used in manufacturing. It can be used almost anywhere where you've got people waiting for something to happen. Now the mathematics are quite complicated, and I'm not clever enough to work them out. So luckily, there's a very simple set of equations that can be used. But really, it comes down to how long is your customer prepared to wait for something.
And so we can entirely just flip this over to be about detailing. And I see some of the guys where they have, they're booked. They have an efficient. They have a staff that's the size that they are, never booked out more than a week in advance. And then I hear some of the guys where they're like booked out 2 months in advance. And they'll have customers who are willing to wait for their service for that long. But gosh, if you were booked out that far, it seems like you would do yourself a big favor by bringing in more people, becoming more efficient, and being able to serve those customers quicker.
Yes, and there's always going to be somebody who sees prestige in waiting for something. If I want to order a fancy Ferrari, I may have to wait an incredible amount of time. But that's part of the buying, it's part of the mystique of it. This is so exclusive, you can't just go out and buy one. But if you're making customers wait a very long time, some will be happy with it. Most probably won't. So if there's competition in the area, a lot of people will just go to the competition. If you've got the area completely sewn up and you're the only detailer, then you can do whatever you want, realistically. Yeah. But most people don't work in that kind of environment. So, if you're making people wait a long time, then it's worth looking at bringing in more staff, looking at your processes, getting the customers through the business, taking the money off them. You've got all these, because effectively you've got people queuing up saying, I want to give you money. Don't make it hard for them to give you money.
Well, and then this goes back to one of our earlier conversations where we were talking about it's that business owner's sandbox, though. So kind of if that's how they prefer to run it with a smaller staff and make people wait, then that's the beauty of being the king.
Indeed, and it's entirely fine. I guess what I would say is if you have processes, and because with all processes can be improved, doesn't matter what it is, then you are handing money over to someone else rather than turning it into profit. And basically, in crude terms, if you're not making profit, you're not in business.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Nobody's just doing this just for fun.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, I'm an amateur detailer. I do it for fun. I find it relaxing to go out and wash my car. That's absolutely fine. So it doesn't matter whether I spend an hour cleaning my car or I spend 2 days doing it. It makes no difference whatsoever. So you get some people who like to buy very esoteric waxes, and it takes them several days to wax a car, and they find it, an enjoyable experience. That's wonderful. I would never say that is wrong.
But when you're washing your own car, are you doing it really efficient anyways? Like, do you have your stuff lined up so it's just like?
Well, yes.
Or is there an invited amount of chaos to make you enjoy it longer?
No, people tend to think that because I work in lean, that my house is beautifully coordinated and incredibly efficient, and I wish it was. I wish I could persuade the rest of my family to follow, but they don't. Life is messy. But if I was paying my mortgage from detailing cars, I would be putting a lot of effort into thinking about the processes. So people tend to think of lean or efficiency as doing more with less. Going back to the example of the Second World War, having the space to think about the problem is a big deal. So by doing less work, by wasting less time, it frees up time for you to ponder what's going on, what you want the direction to be. I'll give you a brief example. It's nothing to do with detailing. I worked with a director in a large company many years ago, and this director spent 40 hours a week in back-to-back meetings. Brutal stuff. I have no idea how this person coped with it. And eventually someone said, well, hold on, if you're doing 40 hours of meetings, when are you working? And a short time later, they were gone.
Yeah. Nothing but meetings.
Nothing but meetings. When are you doing the work that we pay you a lot of money to do? So having space to, and of course, it's easy to get caught. We've all got caught up in busyness is a good thing. It's a very human condition.
Do you think that it's more efficient for somebody if they're thinking of conceptually of how to make their business more lean? So say instead of standing in the middle of it and looking around, like on the middle of your floor, looking at your employees, looking at the processes, is it more efficient to do it that way? Or is it more efficient to step away and say, you sit and look over a lake in silence and think of your job? Or
you want both. I think Ivan LaCroix has mentioned several times of the idea of getting a camera and filming the activity. And then I think incredibly wisely says that watch it back with someone who doesn't know or care about detailing. So they can say, oh, why are you going over there? Why are you going off doing that? What's that got to do with anything? And you want that questioning. So rather like going back to the Second World War, these 4 young women knew nothing about combat whatsoever. And so they could say, well, why are you going off doing this? What's your assumption on this? And it's because sometimes experience can be a bad thing. So you want to physically look at your processes. So in say larger organizations, you would say it's not what someone says they do. It's not what the procedure says they do. It's what they actually do that counts. And maybe that's slightly different in a kind of in a detailing environment. But it's
business concepts just translate over.
Absolutely. So the simple test of any activity is to say, if the customer could see this, would they be willing to pay for it? So if that's someone washing a panel, you could say the customer would be willing to pay that, or someone putting a coating on or polishing or whatever it is, they were willing to pay for that. Would they be willing to pay for you to wander around trying to find that microfiber cloth? Probably not.
Or looking at Facebook on your telephone.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That's got to be just murderous to labor. Is with people having a darn telephone on them and messing around on with that all the time.
Unless you are, of course, the owner who's doing that for business, unless that's marketing. But yes, so everything is about, if the customer could see it, would they be willing to pay for it? And people wandering around looking for tools or looking for products is, in the lean world, would be not seen as productive. It would be seen as non-value added work. So polishing a panel, if it gives the customer what they want, is value added. Wandering around. So when Ivan talks about having a bucket on either side of a car, it's a brilliant idea. But actually, if you've got two people, wash the car, have two people washing the car simultaneously. You go onto YouTube and look at manufacturing of cars, for example. You never see people going from one side of a car to the other. You have mirror images of people on either side of the car. They are not crossing over because it's seen as wasteful. And somewhere, and I only stumbled across it once, I found a video of, and I think it was somewhere in China, where a detail organization was washing a car. And it was basically just two men, either side of a car, with sponges, washing half the car each simultaneously. And of course, did it in half the time. So if you're a business owner, you can say, well, we have one person washing the car, but if you've got someone else stood doing nothing, then actually get them on the other side of the car and clean the other half of the car.
Actually, I used to go to a car wash back before I started detailing, and it's still there. They, instead of having brushes in a tunnel wash, it's a tunnel that the car goes through on a conveyor, but it's two people with a thing on a stick, and it's so they still can call it a hand wash as it goes through, but there's one person on each side and it just goes through on a conveyor. It's exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, just to give a small example, if I had you see lots of people spraying down cars with snow foam or APCs or whatever it is. Now I was thinking about this last night, but if I had my own detail shop, I would put in some tubing around the door where the car goes in and spray the car as it comes in.
Just like when you're entering a tunnel wash.
Just exactly like that. And then spray it off, or find some tubing and put it on a dolly so that you can move the spray over the car, say, 360 degrees. So you just pull a dolly across, pre-spray it with whatever it is, and then rinse it off by moving it back. So a lot of people tend to think of efficiency about buying fancy equipment. If we went out and we bought this CRM or whatever it is, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with equipment, but most solutions come from going to the most basic. What do we need to do? What's the quickest and easiest way of doing it? So going back to Toyota, they may have wanted to follow the Ford production system, but they couldn't do it. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the capacity. They had to find their own solutions. And people who do a job day in, day out, very often have the best solutions somewhere in their mind. It's just as owners, we don't tend to ask them.
Yeah. I'd like it. Man, I always enjoy doing a podcast with you. I mean, it's really fun. And we're at the end of this show, and there was more things that you wanted to talk about, which means I'm going to be able to rope you back in and we're going to do this again.
No, that'd be great. Actually, I saw a very, very simple one. It was at a factory that I was reminded of. I went to a while ago, and this wasn't a food factory. They were making ball bearings or something. You had to clean your shoes on a little grate with chemicals before you were allowed in. Detailing is about cleanliness. Why not have your staff being spotlessly clean? You go into a local garage to have your car serviced or whatever. The days of seeing old men with greasy overalls and all this it's gone. It's they now look as though they work in laboratories. They're all incredibly clean. You see it in top flight motorsport of these people who work in incredibly clean environments. If you've got an incredibly clean environment, that's a marketing tool. You can then show off. This is how being clean is our business.
Yeah, and image is everything.
Indeed,
everything in this business.
Indeed. Anyway, I'll stop rambling now.
All right. Stephen, thank you so much for taking some time out of your late afternoon, my late morning, to be on the Optimum Synergy podcast. I'm getting you back on here again.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for listening to the Optimum Synergy podcast. Questions and comments, leave them for me on the Optimum Synergy podcast Facebook page. Email me direct, DANN@Opti-Coat.com. And if you're going to be at SEMA next week, I look forward to seeing you guys at Topgolf on Wednesday at 7 o'clock for the Customer Appreciation Party. Until then, stay glossy.
The Optimum Synergy podcast is a presentation of Optimum Polymer Technologies. If you'd like to become an Opti-Coat Pro dealer, email us at info@Opti-Coat.com.